We often tend to define and organize our world by the time that has elapsed since the occurrence of significant events. Think of how many chances you've had to celebrate an anniversary, 1 year of dating, 2 years since you had that bicycle crash that sent you to the hospital. For me, it's been 3 years since I touched down in Hawaii, accomplishing a 50-state solo travel goal. 5 years sober, a 10-year high school reunion. How about a 20-year college reunion? They say 25 years of marriage marks a golden anniversary. Now what about 250 years? I certainly can't recall anything that significant to witness. It's a large number. Naturally, there's few occasions to witness the 250th of anything. Thus, when the 250th year of a nation's existence rolls around, it's not something people should ignore. There must be cause for such longevity. Most nations in world history don't stand sovereign for a fraction of that time, before they're wiped off the map by another power, or dissolve as a result of their own errors. 2.5 centuries contains a lot of time for critical events to shape the future, and each of these has a make-or-break essence. One ill-informed decision or stroke of misfortune can result in calamity for millions. It's honestly impressive that we've lasted this long against the forces this country has faced. And maybe that's something worth looking into as well. Naturally, I feel a duty to honor this special milestone of American history. Although the timing fits, no, this is not just because I'm the 50 states guy. I'm on a personal mission more than anything. Think of it more like a pilgrimage, the symbolic capstone of the 50 states adventure. Now, the US is no theocracy, but there are some valid candidate destinations that would stand well to receive the status of pilgrimage site. True to its definition, I mean to describe places that should be on the radar for anyone who has at least some degree of respect for the United States. They should be thrilled to visit these places one day. One may argue that I've already done enough by exploring all 50 states. That's true, but I'll call your 50 states expectation and raise you a semi-quincentennial tribute video. Over the course of a week, I have set out to celebrate our country's 250th birthday in the grandest way any lone individual in his 20s possibly can. I'm here to pave a route through several historically significant locations that either reflect the values for which this American Republic stands, or had been part of the production of the freedoms and liberties that shaped this nation. 250 years is enough time to forget the tone of American culture. We're so far distant, out of touch with both the quotidian and exceptional concerns of the age. We forget what was at stake, the risks and challenges of an independent USA. Unable to relate with the cost of this movement, even if we've been fighting subsequent political revolutions in our own time. In order to get at the root of understanding this country, we've got to go back. Way further back than 250 years ago. How does 406 years sound? We begin our journey in modern-day Plymouth, Massachusetts, where the town feels caught in a wrestle between two time periods which are vying for cultural influence. Plymouth's once tranquil shores now cry out with a timbre of dock activity, construction, and motor vehicles. An array of boats rest on the now congested wharf. This coastline harbors, pun intended, a famous legend that is now immortalized in American tradition. This stone, known as Plymouth Rock, memorializes the historic event. The landing of the Pilgrims at Plymouth Bay. This first morning, we're supposedly here at the landing site. Tons of lore and myths surrounding the actual history, even including the story of the rock itself. Was the rock actually here in 1620 when the Pilgrims had landed? Could it have been swapped? The Plymouth Rock wasn't even identified as the landing site until 1741. Now enshrined in eternal American glory, Plymouth Rock is given mythological treatment. Seriously, look at the structure that shelters it. It's as if the rock is the centerpiece of a Greek temple to be worshipped. We've mythologized this because it holds symbolic value to us. It's an icon that represents the birth of our nation at one of its earliest identifiable origins. It's a fun story. You might hear the continuation of the story during Thanksgiving season, though if American history was condensed into one large book volume, Plymouth Rock might serve as the first few sentences of a single chapter. There's so much to unpack and so much nuance as well. Currently, the Mayflower II, a reconstruction of the first Mayflower, is docked here in Plymouth, the spiritual successor 400 plus years later. but $19 is a lot to cough up at 9 a.m. Interestingly, the original Mayflower was a lone voyager now immortalized in fame, but the Mayflower 2? Sure, it's a replica of the first, and a large ship, but now one of hundreds on Plymouth Bay. Let's head into the town for some more insights about Plymouth. As a couple side notes, firstly, wow, I finally learned how landscaping is done on these steep hills. How about that? And then, apparently there are these statues of seals all over town, painted and decorated. It's kind of a can you go around and find them all deal. Maybe we'll find a few more. Founding a settlement an ocean away is no easy task. The early 17th century settlers understood the frighteningly real risk of death that accompanied their new religious freedom. Surely the town understands the trials that came along, as nearly every structure in the neighborhood, it seems, has some way to honor the voyage, settlement, or colony. There are so many memorials and monuments and statues commemorating each and every aspect of this daunting task of setting up a colony here. To the British, these folks were dissenters called separatists, for they had separated from the Anglican Church in 1606. Under imminent persecution, they found refuge in Leiden. Economic hardship ultimately pushed these folks to decide on a move to North America, where they could start anew. 102 members plus a crew of 30 climbed aboard the Mayflower on what would become a 66-day voyage. The goal was to steer towards the Hudson River area and settle further south, but preparation delays found them departing England later than they had wished. Go figure, by the time they reached North America, an autumn storm forced them up off their course to Provincetown, near Cape Cod today. The Pilgrims searched this peninsula but found it generally barren for their expectations, and went further west to reach the area we now celebrate. It was getting too late in the year and they had to settle somewhere before winter. On November 11th, 1620, well, technically the 21st, but that begs for a whole explanation about old versus new style dating, and we don't have time, the Mayflower Compact was signed aboard the ship. This experiment in local civic rule had started, serving as one of the first foundations for a framework of government in America. Timely enough, many flags adorn this preserved residential district as well. It's either a patriotic spirit or an overcalculation for tourism. Maybe it's just the 4th of July. After which, will these flags get taken down, or do they remain up for some time longer? To the side of this church is Burial Hill. True to the cultural flavor of New England towns, grave markers centuries old are still standing, bringing the past into the present. Burial Hill has been used since the 1620s, the earliest graves inside which were constructed out of wood. Naturally, they've long decayed. From the mid-1600s onward, stone replaces wood and gives us an invaluable set of clues into the past, through the folk art and genealogical data inscribed. The first Pilgrims are buried here, and so were their many generations of descendants who lived in Plymouth Bay Colony, Massachusetts Colony, and finally the state of Massachusetts. And nestled in this cemetery atop this hill are a couple markers to the first fort built in Plymouth. It's a testament to the ever-shifting landscape of towns and communities, and underscores the vital importance of this historic preservation effort when nothing's immune to change. No patch of land is guaranteed a state of permanence. From the hill looking out, you can view a bit of the sea shimmering below. You have to wonder what the original Pilgrims thought about their geography. Did they ever expect what movements and events this little settlement in due time would influence? As we scurry down to the town center, Plymouth today consists of your storefronts that cater to the locals, but more heavily to attract out-of-towners drawn in by the legendary allure of the Plymouth colony story. It's fine, the district is quaint and pleasant, not much else. I feel I've got to point out though how nice it is that the town has tried to keep the cultural character somewhat intact through the design. Nice to know that Plymouth's cultural district hasn't been uprooted in favor of chain shops and depressing modernist building facades. For this next chapter of the day, I set out to Plymouth-Patuxet museums for a supplemental perspective on the Plymouth story. The Pilgrims found villages that had been constructed, but these appeared empty, abandoned. For this part of North America was not some vacant expanse of forest. Native populations of many sort had been living here for about 12,000 years already, and Patuxet was the indigenous name the natives called the Plymouth area. In 1616, an epidemic had spread across all of New England, spurred from previous European arrivals in the New World. With no immunity to European diseases, this proved catastrophic to native communities. By 1619, 70% of the local Wampanoag had perished to such an illness, but small populations were still living in today's Massachusetts and Rhode Island. The Pokanoket, a subgroup of Wampanoag, had observed the Pilgrims' struggles. I was told here that the entire area of Patuxet Village would be inhabited by a family of 5, more or less. Now that really puts this whole story into perspective. By contrast, the native culture in Massachusetts demanded a critical self-sufficiency. By their own measure, the natives consider the Pilgrims children due to their inability to sustain themselves on their own. If not for the help of the Wampanoag natives, the colonists likely wouldn't have survived on their own. Moving on from the recreated native village, the 17th century English village displays a model of what Plymouth might have looked like in its infancy 4 centuries ago. We find thatched houses, gardens, and what looks to be its own main street. The conditions were, though, quite dire over the next few months. One half of the Pilgrims died by the end of the winter. The first governor of the colony, John Carver, was among the fatalities. In the face of these dangerous conditions, William Bradford rose to the occasion and took on the reins of leadership as the new governor of this Plymouth colony. By the spring of 1621, the Plymouth community agreed to form an alliance with the Pokanoket, which included efforts for peace and cooperation. Finally, we arrive at the National Monument to the Forefathers, which stands to remember the sacrifices of those before us. These very pilgrims who took great risks in establishing a foothold for religious freedom are honored as sort of legendary patriarchs in the American mythos. It's somewhat of a parallel for the very reason I'm out here. A reminder to be grateful for all that's transpired so that I could live with certain liberties. Walking around the massive block of stone, you'll find inscribed the ideals held firmly by the Pilgrim community. It might be the world's largest solid granite monument. If you can believe it, there are houses right next door. Could you imagine living next to a gargantuan memorial statue? And no, that's not a laurel wreath. That's a bird's nest atop the woman's head. But facetious observations aside, this magnificent scene gets you thinking. For all we know of the original settlers, and sure, we know the names of many, think of the countless other individuals anonymous to the historical record. What were their stories? How would these ordinary people come to influence the future of this continent? What would this society become? "155 years after the Mayflower landed at Plymouth, the colonial English presence in America has grown tremendously. The colonial population has reached such a massive number that its populace is on the cusp of fighting a war for independence. Now, it's difficult to tell the story of America's rebellion without mentioning Boston. However, we've already been there, and I wish to waste no time revisiting the same monuments and buildings and telling the same story as I did back in 2022. During our visit, we already highlighted its role as the powder keg of the American Revolution. Check out my video in Boston, link in the description if you'd like to learn more about the lead up to the American Revolution. Though, maybe it's smart for us to fit in a little snippet so we know where we left off. And who owned that house? Why, it was Paul Revere! Yes, Paul Revere was the guy who rode on a horse and warned us all about how the Redcoats are coming, or the British are coming. Yeah, there are parts of the American Revolution which are sort of romanticized and turned into more of a folktale, even though that was a true event. So to where did Paul Revere ride on horseback from Boston, warning the colonists that the British regulars, or the Redcoats, were coming? Well, that brings us to here and now. We've moved up to Lexington. No, not Lexington, Kentucky. Lexington, Massachusetts. Within the city, the Minuteman commuter bikeway, once a railway, now allows bike traffic, an easy through passage that parallels the historic route of the British military between Cambridge, which sits right next to Boston, and Concord not too far away, for which the first battle of the American Revolutionary War was named. We're walking onto Lexington Battle Green. 249 years ago, this space looked much different before paved streets, before automobiles, before the electric grid and local infrastructure. Just a few houses, open pastures, and farms were to be seen here. On the early morning of April 19, 1775, tension boiled over into armed conflict for the first time. Local militias of common men heeded to the call and formed guard thanks to Paul Revere's warning, ready to defend their communities against approaching British forces. It's unclear which side fired first, but the shot heard round the world ignited the first armed conflict seen between the British Army and the local Continental militias. Before, there was only tension, but there was no turning back from this escalation. 8 Minutemen become the first casualties of the American Revolution. If you don't count the Boston Massacre a few years preceding that. The militia couldn't hold the British back, and from Lexington, the British moved along to Concord. No, not Concord, New Hampshire. Concord, Massachusetts. It's not often you see monuments erected so far long ago in history. Commemorations feel like recent developments to prevent the ravages of time from devouring a historical event into oblivion. Passing through Concord, it's here at the Old North Bridge that the American forces resisted the inland march of the British. The colonists in this town had been preparing and waited, also warned by the man on horseback. Shockingly, the British general ordered a retreat as they did not anticipate the organized counterattack by the Continental Army. As troops proceed back, locals once again, given notice by Mr. Revere, pour into this checkpoint and surround the British men with ambush and fire, prompting a never-ending continuation of retreat, spurring a harrowing 16-mile, 8-hour showdown for the Redcoats along a local road, from Concord to Lexington to Menotomy to Cambridge, back to Boston. This path, known today as Battle Road, is too long for me to run through today, but the National Park Service preserves segments for several miles along this corridor of British advance and retreat with the particular unit, Minuteman National Historical Park. As we tread along these fields, put yourself into the shoes of one of the British regulars in this scene. If you had made it this far without being shot, you would be seeing fields just like these along the way. They've been farmed since the 1600s. But you wouldn't be thinking much about them. More likely you'd be thinking, get me the hell out of here. It's gotta be traumatizing. It forces me to wonder. You never know just how much each battle can affect the outcome of a war at large. How do you reconcile the atrocity of war with the noble struggle for independence? Even more, I likely wouldn't be alive if not for this independence movement. And these battles are part of that struggle. How do you root for American independence while rooting against the death of soldiers probably around my age, and quite a few who'd be younger than me at this point? It's a tough dilemma to digest. War is a totally different ballgame than a non-violent conflict, yet it still inspires me with an emergent question. Are you willing, figuratively, to fight for what you believe in? How much? By what means? How far am I willing to go? Which things are worth the fight? Which are not? You ask yourself so much, you start to sound like a founding father. So yes, the colonists drove the British out and earned victory here, but this battle only started a much longer, tiresome conflict that lasted 8 more painful years. These restored areas, or just these places which are deliberately curated to capture a moment in time, remind me of my love for historic preservation. It's one of the closest things we have to time travel itself. The day was long, but well worth the driving, walking, and adventure. It excites me for what is next to come on this week-long tour. Today I'm entering what was 250 years ago, British North America's largest city. A cosmopolitan center of the day that had arguably beaten New York City in influence. It was here that rebellion became revolution, that the colonists decided to form their more perfect union, here in Philadelphia. As July 4th, Independence Day itself, draws near, I'm reminded that it wouldn't have been a proper Independence Day celebration were I to spend the time, well, independently. Thankfully, I planned ahead for that. Today I am not exploring alone. I managed to connect with a great friend from long ago. He has a lot to say and is full of wisdom, so I consider it a privilege for him to tag along, in spite of his busy schedule, and enlighten me the whole way through with some great insights. Let's get to know him as I ask him a few questions about this Independence season.
Okay, well, here we are. It's a beautiful, sweltering morning here in this wonderful city. Please introduce yourself in any way you'd like.
Hello everyone, my name's Michael. In college I went by Shady, and the reason for that is not because I'm a shady person, not because my parents really like Eminem, but because in middle school, around 2013, 2012 era, there was a running back for the Eagles named LaShawn McCoy, and my last name is McCoy. So I got the nickname Shady McCoy because I shared the same last name as a very well-renowned running back that played for the Eagles. So I also go by Shady McCoy, and that's what Eli knows me as Shady.
Yeah, I knew your name was Shady before it was Michael. That's basically.
And people remember Shady; it's a nickname as opposed to just Michael.
Right.
Because that where we went to school, making first impressions is a really big deal. You're meeting a lot of new people for the first time, so if you just say, "Oh, I'm Michael," it goes in 1 year, one out, one in 1 year, one out, and then one out the other. So Shady sticks with people. They start thinking, why is his name Shady? He's actually a really nice person. He doesn't seem shady, so
Yeah,
it helps
there you go.
stick.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it is very sweltering today to add to. It's going to be up to over 100 in Philadelphia today.
Yeah, that's right. But we're on the grounds here on this
In the
day.
shade.
We're in the shade with Shady. Yeah. And the timing couldn't be more perfect, as we'll get to soon enough. But how are you feeling on this sweltering morning?
Good. It's today's the first day of my break. So tomorrow I'm driving to Vermont. It'll be a nice, well-needed vacation. Just recently I got last fall I started graduate school at Rowan for a PhD, and it's everything that I loved and hoped for. I'm doing research. I'm working in a lab, gathering data, trying to present the data, trying to design experiments. So it's been a lot, and every single day you're learning something new. So imagine going into a job not knowing what to do. So there's a lot of reading that's required, a lot of troubleshooting, a lot of trying to figure out what went wrong, what went right. So right now it's good to not have to think about work. I'm in like vacation mode. I can be very uninhibited, I suppose. I don't have anything lurking in the back of my mind. I could, come into this with a clear head.
Yeah, hopefully this serves as some sort of reprieve or a nice vacation away from that.
Yes. Yeah.
Shady, you've not only been a longtime fan of the Coverage Project, but I've also had the pleasure of getting to know you over the last several years. What do you make of your official debut on the Coverage Project?
I try not to think about it too, I don't know what you would call it. Again, I want to stay very humble, naturalistic, true to myself. I don't want to come across as something that's unauthentic, not genuine. So I try not to think of it as this grand experience. I'm doing it for Eli, doing it with Eli. I try and think of it for that purpose, for that reason. Just spending time with you is awesome, getting to catch up, because we went back to the same college together, and just seeing where Eli's grown to and the amount that he's made with the Coverage Project. Like during my commutes on the train, I would watch it and then get transported to these different locations, and your commentary, it's very, I was talking to my grandma about it. You're not cheery, but very enthusiastic. It's not like you're coming across as disingenuous. Like I feel like a lot of people perhaps might put on this facade of trying to hype up an experience, but you genuinely enjoy it, and like your enthusiasm gets conveyed to the audience. And I think it's really something special and unique. And I don't see you losing that touch either, because I feel like a lot of people, they scale up and they lose where they came from. And so I like how this has started for a passion for you. And is it still a passion? You enjoy
Oh,
it?
I no doubt about it. Like
Yeah.
I'm taking time out of my summer. It's a busy summer to do this, and because it means a lot to me. So absolutely. Um, yeah, Shady has known me before the coverage project was ever a thing. Before I signed up for a YouTube account with the name Coverage Project, you've known me, and so it means a lot for you to be standing here on these grounds on this special day. Um, it's going to be a long day, but no, it's a meaningful day as well. We're standing here on hallowed grounds, essentially, in a way. Um, we're here standing at Philadelphia's Old Quarter, the oldest part of one of America's largest cities, Philadelphia. And these grounds are home to some very significant events with regard to American history. Now, you have, I wouldn't say you live here, you definitely don't live here in Philadelphia, but I would say you live closer to this area than I do.
Yeah.
What was your background with regard to this place?
My connection.
Yeah.
I'd say I grew up in the suburbs. So for like elementary school field trips, this was a very accessible location. I think in the National Constitution Center on that side, or maybe this side, I don't want to misquote it, but I remember distinctly like the room with all of the Declaration of Independence signers, which was really neat. It's I guess kind of like Madame Tussauds, where you have the wax models, but instead it's a bunch of, I guess, bronzen statues of all the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Um, so, it's been 250 years, and since the birth of America, and back then it's this cultural hodgepodge of all these different European countries coming in and trying to make this new identity with America. So, symbolistically, I guess it's a symbol for, unity without factions, or I don't know. I guess having a lot of disparate groups of people come together for a unified purpose. So I look at it that way. Uh, the specific details, the historical details, I don't know much about. I'm very ignorant in that regard. But just looking at it thematically as a concept, um, being able to unite a lot of people, come together under a common theme, common cause, trying to create your own country. One of the writings I really like is Thomas Paine and his influence on making America. Basically, trying to persuade the colonies, why should a continent be ruled by an island? Speaking about the U.S. being ruled by um, Britain at the time, and he brought up a lot of these gut arguments, and I feel like there's a lot of, I don't know, we don't spend enough time reading about things, and we need a slower form of consumption. A lot of the times our attention's hijacked, and it's better to just sit down, read a book, and really process the words and try and get into the minds of what the writers were thinking about. So, you have TikTok and then these reels that are so short that it's definitely misconstrued in one way or another, that you can't get the whole message across. So, uh, you know, beyond me rambling,
No, this is all good.
Thomas Paine, I really liked. Common Sense, he wrote, I think Age of Reason as well. But I think Common Sense was more of like a pamphlet written to try and sway the colonies to try and rebel and revolt against Britain. And, you know, it's unfortunate that war had to be the I don't know, the agent to cause that.
Sure.
But
no, this is
yeah.
all superb. I was just getting at, like, did you take field trips here when you were younger?
Yeah,
but this is
I
fantastic.
can't recall field trips, the specific details of it, because like I said, I'm very ignorant of the specifics. But it's nice to take a break, because I feel like a lot of times we're just doing, and we never get to be. We're human beings, not human doings. So I like to speak in fortune cookies. I try and
Yeah.
look at things from a very first principles basis, where it's like, okay, if you take away um, the specific details, like what is the essence, what is the core essence of things. And um, I don't know, one of the other fortune cookies is that wisdom is the distilled essence of knowledge. So I think, with all the knowledge, how can we distill it down to get to this? I think of it as like a Rosetta Stone. Like we all, as humans, have these experiences that we can relate with one another. It's just the actors change, the events change, but at its core, it's still something fundamental that we can all relate to.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. We don't read enough in general.
What is what does this area mean to you? You said during the trips at college, you
Yeah.
would come here and visit. What was
Yeah.
that like?
Well, I'm a big fan of history. I think it's no surprise to the people watching this. I'm not someone who just kind of takes these places lightly. I like to attribute meaning to a lot of ordinary things. We use symbols and objects to represent greater human ideas. For me, this place, and by large, the entire trip that I'm going on, kind of represents like an ode to my gratitude because, in a way, I don't think I'd be alive if it wasn't for this country. My family has come from various disparate ethnic, cultural backgrounds. And it was this idea of America, like you said, where people could come together under an idea, a collective identity that allowed people to pour into this country, to communicate and share ideas that ultimately affected and benefited the generations of posterity in a way. The inventors, the innovators, the speakers, the people with ideas, to allow this place to become kind of a melting pot of not only people but ideas. And uh, as a result, it drew even more generations of immigrants here, um, some of whom are my ancestors. I think it's a slim chance that I would be here, alive, standing here, if it wasn't for the actions that unfolded here 250 years ago to this day. And that's what I take from this. My whole trip is just kind of like, you know, there's not one place that's a utopia, but we can definitely try our best to come up with a best case scenario in a way. And I think that's what America is in a way. It's kind of like the best case scenario for humanity's ideas.
Yeah, an ideal to achieve.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't call it, well, maybe I would call it a good enough scenario, but that's what it really means to me. Like I said, 250 years ago, on this very day, a bunch of people inside that building behind us drafted a sheet of paper that has transformed history as you know it.
Okay, I'm pretty sure I done goofed up right here. The Founding Fathers didn't sign the Declaration of Independence on July 2nd. The Continental Congress voted on and passed the resolution to break away from Great Britain to form an independent nation. So you could argue that today, July 2nd's the birthday of the US. The Declaration of Independence would be adopted 2 days later and signed later on after that.
So, what strikes you about that? Just being here on such a commemorative, extraordinary anniversary right now.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like too much. I understand the gravity of it, but 250 years ago is such a long time. I feel like you become disconnected from it. And again, it's a good ideal to have. That's why we have statues, I guess, to commemorate different things, to remind us of where we came from. But in the moment, it's hard to convey that feeling. You have to go through that experience to really feel that feeling. So, I look again with books and media and movies. Like movies are a good way to try and convey that feeling, that experience. Like you're supposed to commiserate or feel that empathy. And here, I'm sure once we go inside, it'll feel a lot more surreal.
Yeah.
But aside from that, it's just the idea, the ideals that it stands for, and you just got to sit back, be a little introspective, and just try and imagine what it was like 250 years ago. And it's so difficult, you really can't. Like, I can imagine what it was like yesterday because it's so close in time and proximity, but it's, you can't compare apples to oranges in that context. It's just so far of a span of time. Everything was so much more different then, and it's hard to try and wrap my head around that 250 years ago. It's you know
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to absorb. We're going to be seeing a lot today, not just the building behind us, but we're going to see a lot. What are you looking forward to most, and why are you looking forward to that?
I guess the conversations along the way, um, and then maybe seeing something will strike a thought in my mind. Because again, I feel like we're so preoccupied in the hustle and bustle of things that, I could say it for myself now. I've just been so consumed with my research program that I haven't had a chance to just, daydream or think beyond just what was in the present moment. I feel like that's just stripping you away of your time and your experience. And I always think, you know, people who are on their phones scrolling through reels or whatever, consuming whatever content's out there, if you ask them, what have you been looking at for the past hour, or what have you been watching, or whatever, most of the time they can't provide something very articulate. It's not having an impact on them. It's just stripping away of them of their time. So I think of it like, how are you no better than a zombie? You're just a corpse, just scrolling through something. So I'm hoping through this experience I can really be what do you call it, corporalized, I guess, like in the present moment, trying to think about, what's going on, read what was going on, try and become a bit more educated, and not only for the sake of education, but just for the sake of existing, like seeing something that's meaningful, that's purposeful, trying to better my own self and try and detach myself from my role, my hustle and bustle, my human doingness, and try and just be a human being. And hopefully I'm impacted in one way or another through this display that they have going on. And there's a lot of people. That's another great thing too, that a lot of people are coming together and a lot of exchanges going on there. So maybe we'll meet someone, have a good conversation with them. And so I really don't know what to expect. I'm going in with an open mind, no agenda. There's no check boxes that I'm trying to strike off. So I'm just going in for the experience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, that's kind of the goal of today, to take it all in, to absorb it, to see what more we can learn. Yeah, I want to precede this question by just saying, on the coverage project, you all know, I know, you might even know Shady. I like to reflect. I like to really take things seriously, ruminate on my experiences, ruminate on what I see. So with that, I want to ask you a question here. If there's one Independence Day themed question you want answered, you want resolved by the end of today, what would that be?
I feel like the one, I don't know, it's very vague. One thing I've been thinking a lot about is, it's been 250 years since the founding of America. What's still keeping us together? And one of the things, I'm looking at it from a very broad social perspective, and this is just opinions of my own. But, if you, with history, you want to look at what's been done previously. What can we use as like a model to predict um, future countries? So I go back to, I guess, maybe Rome,
Hmm.
ancient Greece, like early republics, and how long they lasted. I don't want to be like a doomsayer or what do you call it, fear monger, but what is it that's keeping America still together today? Again, one of the things that strikes me is that I feel like America has been riding on the coattails of Christianity. As much as you want to say that America is, there's no um, there's no country religion, there's no official language, but we can all fairly say a lot of the people coming from Europe were Christians, and I feel like a lot of America has been held together by Christianity. So I feel like there's a rise of atheism, a rise of secularism. Why is it that America is still being held together today? I feel like a lot of people, there's no longer a policing from within. A lot of people say, "Oh, you need religion to have laws and rules and whatnot." And I feel like you can be a good person without having a fearing God, without fearing a God. But I look at it like, we're still riding on the inertia of Christianity. And I feel like a lot of people aren't being policed from within. And what I mean by that is like having this clear conscience of what to do, helping someone that needs help, putting someone up that needs to be put up, these sorts of things. I feel like we don't have that discretion of our own. So the one thing I really want to see answered is, what is still keeping America together today? I feel like it's, again, just the inertia of Christianity, the inertia of the past 250 years. I think, again, you can't predict the future, but I'm just looking at it now that I'm like old enough, seeing trends, recognizing trends. Maybe I'm just becoming older and more fear mongering and thinking that things aren't going to be as better as they used to be. That nostalgia of like, oh, the past was better, this and that. But beyond all of that, just the core question is, what is keeping America together today? I feel like the media, which mediates our perception, you see so much strife, so much conflict, so much neighbor against neighbor on the news, but that's just the availability heuristic or availability bias. You're just seeing what's available on the news, and it's not a true representation of the baseline of what's actually going on. So, it's hard. I feel like media now is just entertainment. What enrages engages. People are engaged to things that upset them. You have a bunch of scissor statements where you say one thing against another person or another group, and that group like vehemently disagrees with it. So that's, I guess, they found out. Very, 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 very intelligent people know that these things work. So the media, as a business, they want to do things that are divisive. They want to split people apart. And I want to see today, how united people are, how close they are, getting away from the news and just going in the present moment, seeing, what brings people together, what's keeping the United States still together.
Totally. Yeah, it's such an important question we have to ask. Like, are we one country? Are we 50 states? We might be both.
Yeah.
Are we an even greater collection of tribes and factions at this moment in 2026? Who knows?
I think that's been the case with the Federalist Papers. I forget, was it James Madison, another person? I forget that at the time. You could cut this out. I'm totally wrong, but I thought the Federalist Papers were a way of trying to reconcile this issue of how do you get the larger states, or how do you get the smaller states to have more representation. So a lot of the U.S., it's not black or white. There's always this gray area of how can you be both equal but also be equitable, and it's a hard tug of war to play.
Totally.
So you have 50 states, but we're one country with 50 states. Each person is an individual. We're independent, but we still have to come together collectively for greater causes beyond ourselves. So it's hard to straddle both of those roles that you have to fulfill.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Shady. I will be asking you a few more questions by the end of the day, just to kind of see what transpires throughout the day. I think that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. We have a large itinerary. Yeah, it's pretty long, but we're gonna make the day count. We're gonna have a good time. We're gonna try not to get heat exhaustion, and let's see what happens. All right, stay tuned. It's even better that they're passing through. I love it. This is awesome. Unfortunately, there's a long ass line to the Liberty Bell, and that means it might be a waste of time to wait in line. We've already seen it. Here's a photo of it. We saw it last time we were in Philadelphia. Cool.
And it's still recording, right?
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I don't think the Liberty Bell is all that it's cracked up to be.
Oh, good one. That was a good one.
And frustratingly, even longer than the Liberty Bell, a 2-hour line would await us for Independence Hall. My goodness, long lines for everything. This was totally unlike my first visit to the city back in 2021. Again, link in the description. We would be able to view Independence Hall's front facade at least. We were soon drawn in by a voice amplified by a microphone. It was Philadelphia's mayor, Sherelle Parker, giving a speech for today's momentous occasion. It was alright, I guess. A good time to apply sunscreen under a tree.
And let us affirm to the world that with rural, suburban, and urban America, we are one America, a united nation.
Then we realized a hilarious irony. Enter the Mayor's Parade. Yes, that's what the mayor's speech actually was opening for. If you came to Philadelphia to celebrate the Founding Fathers' vision of a society that protects against elite tyranny, wait until you get the opportunity to wave and cheer for your favorite mayors from all around the country. And I get that these mayors might just be good people trying to show support for the season, but it couldn't be funnier that this was taking place during the Independence Day season. Like, this was their way of celebrating the 250. They thought that parading themselves around on a ceremonial pedestal around the National Historical Park, sporting mayoral sashes, yeah, let's make sure we inform you that we're mayors, by the way, is a way to be in touch with the American cause? It's such a dystopian picture to me. Why are we doing this? This is just not the vibe for that. But how nice it was to retreat to the shade. The sun was really beginning to pound its rays on us. We've made it to our first indoor attraction, the American Philosophical Society Museum. The American Philosophical Society is one of America's oldest learned societies, dating to the mid-1700s, founded by one Benjamin Franklin. We'll talk about him later. And promotes knowledge and education in the humanities. Inside, authentic reprints of important Revolution-era documents displayed on the walls. It's crazy how hidden this place is. It's directly adjacent to the Independence Hall building, yet receives a delightfully appropriate number of tourists to fit inside the building's confines. No lines. Lots of cobbled or brick streets in this old city district, which to no one's surprise reflects the old age of this city. Philadelphia has grown a lot, but at least some of this area has been preserved in some capacity. But definitely not all, and not even a majority. Most of what stood in Philly 250 years ago is long gone. It's a bit tragic, but that's a consequence of time's passage. As Shady pointed out to me while en route, we only see the survivors of Philadelphia's constructions. Many examples are found here wherein a site might only have its base intact, or perhaps merely a historical account, a photo, or a written document to prove its place in the record. It goes to show how much blood, sweat, and tears are put into the construction labor just for these to be washed away. As we opened the door to Carpenter's Hall, we were welcomed by an employee of a municipal storytelling group once upon a nation, who offered to share a fun story related to this famed location. Just as the story ended and we applauded her ability to amuse tourists with the power of narration, we heard some spontaneous commotion from outside. Another parade was about to begin, and this one was better than the mayor's parade. Back to Carpenter's Hall. Constructed in the early 1770s, this building initially housed the Carpenters Company, kind of a social club for architects, engineers, and contractors. In 1774, however, this building hosted the First Continental Congress. Representatives from every colony, save for Georgia, met here in Philadelphia to discuss the mounting tension with Britain. Although they were united inside the meeting house, united in opinion were they not. Most delegates wanted compromise, not independence. The best that could be agreed upon was an opposition to British good boycotts. No taxation without representation. They were tired of the exploitation occurring an ocean away. Yet the importance of the Continental Congress was more symbolic than practical. It was here that the first major show of unity between culturally distinct colonies was exercised. Around us, the collection of portraits, flags, and chairs urged us to ask a pressing question. Do we still understand our history? Are we too far removed from the events of American independence to understand what it means to declare independence? While other countries might still live their history through upholding centuries-old traditions and holidays that encourage thoughtful reflection, how much are we doing that in the US today? It's not like we're sitting at a Thanksgiving dinner table reflecting on gratitude for July 4th. How do you teach the concept of independence to future generations as you would teach gratitude at a Thanksgiving dinner table? I guess another way to frame it, how much are we externalizing history versus internalizing it within our being? We were already reaping the fruits of 2 hours that would have been wasted in line accumulating sunburns. It's the power of smaller attractions to make you feel less like a customer and more like a member of the American community. We knew by now this was the right move. And then we come to the first bank. We were told that we arrived on a special grand opening of some sort after a while of closure. We encountered not only the relief of air conditioning, but a treasure trove of items. You could call the exhibition inside America's Greatest Hits of Diplomacy, as to suggest we didn't get here to the point that we are after 250 years of independence on merits alone. Sure, that was a big part, but it was also from the partnerships with other nations, the friendships we forged along the way. And let's give a shout out to France and Morocco, as well as the Oneidas. Y'all are the true ones, backing us up since the very beginning. Just a short walk away is the Ben Franklin Museum. Benjamin Franklin, never a president, but a profoundly impactful founding father, as well as a brilliant man aside from politics. Born in Boston, he then called Philadelphia home and shaped it in remarkable ways. Remember the American Philosophical Society? A true polymath he was indeed, diplomat, statesman, writer, inventor, scientist, surveyor, and the list goes on. In this museum, you can learn quite a lot about his life, from his younger days as a printer, to his various creative inventions, to his role in the American Revolution, and his contributions to the city of Philadelphia. We beelined to the Quaker Meeting House and enjoyed a glimpse of life in 1776, outside the political sphere. The Quakers, a pacifist religious group, were caught between sides of the conflict during the Revolution, as their strict adherence to political neutrality was seen as a complicit activity that enabled the opposing side. They were often punished by outsiders. At the same time, they did support the war effort in their own Quaker way by providing aid to the wounded on both sides. Following that, we come to the Christ Church Burial Ground, where some of the most famous Philadelphian founding fathers are interred. Before leaving the Ben Franklin Museum, we actually received another fun historic tale from Once Upon a Nation. And the enthusiastic storytellers actually helped us gain appreciation for this next destination, the National Constitution Center, even more. Sure, we declared our independence in 1776, but it wasn't until the year of 1787 that we essentially got our act together. Yeah, maybe we should forget about the 250 then. We can wait until 2037, right? It was 239 years ago that the Constitution was signed. Before that, we had the Articles of Confederation, and that didn't work too well. Try levying the taxes you need as a federal government. It won't work, I promise. We were the disunited states, 13 individual states only linked by these Articles of Confederation, which functioned with their own money, armies, and taxes. We were a hot mess struggling to lead ourselves, no wonder we needed something new. Could liberty survive? Amid severe tensions between national and state interests, 55 delegates met up here in Philadelphia for the Constitutional Convention in May 1787. Intense debate ran its course and saw the founders struggling to find common ground. The Constitution saved the day, though. It pushed aside central authority and established the three branches of the federal government: executive, legislative, and judicial. Each branch given a crucial role, but none with total authority. Essentially, our president becomes a king with limited powers. Thank you, Founding Fathers James Wilson and James Madison, and many others, for your efforts. I actually have a video on that when we visited DC back in 2022, the whole three branches. Not until 1789 was it formally put into practice with this new government. There were lots of issues that weren't totally resolved though, such as who merited the right to vote, who had access to citizenship, and the issue of slavery. How do you expect a group of anyone to agree on everything all at once? The founders were well aware that not everything could be accomplished by convention's end, but agreed at least that if this country was going to be a work in progress, let its set of rules for government reflect this with the option for amendments. Change is permitted. For the first time in human history, a government governed by we the people. It might be the most powerful vision and the most daring experiment of human history. All in all, a fantastic place to learn how the nation has operated throughout its independence. I likened it to the APUSH Museum. That stands for AP US History. It's a high school course both Shady and I took well before we met each other. At long last, it was time to visit Independence Hall. No tour required, no Congress in session, open house. It was 4:50 p.m. and when we saw what looked to be an hour-long line, still, I'm not gonna lie, I felt a bit defeated. This was the centerpiece of the day and it looked like I'd have to say goodbye to Shady before I'd ever get access inside. Was it worth going inside? Well, on any other random day, probably. But it wasn't in the spirit of July 2nd. In short time, I realized that I have a choice. Just like the Founding Fathers, I could side with typical complacent convention, or forge my own independence from touristic headaches. All day, Shady and I proved that. It just wasn't in the spirit of the America250 season to place myself at the mercy of a line, or security, or the clock, or the relentless sun. We had seen the outside first thing in the morning. With everything we got to do, I resolved to take comfort in an already accomplished day spent on our own terms. I already had my life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and that was good enough for me.
Alright, well, it was a long, hot, sweltering day as we predicted. But I think it was a pretty productive day. We saw a lot, we learned a lot, we reflected a lot. How are you feeling, Shady?
Feeling the sweltering heat as well. I've had this water jug the whole day. I've drank it twice this whole amount. I was gonna do a third, but I felt bad getting a whole thing of water from this place we just had a pretzel at. And then I don't know if you wanted to mention why we were cut off. I don't know if you include
Yeah,
that
no, I'll
little
do the
scene.
honors there.
But it was funny you had mentioned copyright music they started playing.
Yeah, we were in the groove. I set everything up. I set the tripod up, the mini mics, and like a minute into filming, they turned on some copyright music, and there goes our nice setup. So instead, we're adapting. We're doing something different. We're walking back, and we're asking the same questions. Well, I'm asking you a lot of questions, but...
Follow-up questions.
Yeah, exactly. This is kind of the follow-up session. So, was there a favorite part of the day for you?
I think the last part at Constitution Hall was my most favorite. I don't know why. Just seeing all the different the signers in the signing hall there, and the bronze and statues of them was really nice. And a lot of them, I don't know if it's to scale, the sizes, their heights and all, but they seemed smaller than typically what we're used to now, heights of the signers.
Right.
George Washington was pretty tall, over 6 foot, but for the rest of them, it was interesting, you know, the psychology of having a taller height, you know, the impression that it gives, you know, maybe that's why Washington was so revered and why they made him in charge of the executive branch.
Yeah, talk to Abraham Lincoln about that.
Yeah.
The top hat and everything.
But to go back to the question I had earlier, what makes America united, what keeps us together, I think they did a really good job during that Constitution Hall segment where they go all the way to the Revolutionary War, to the Declaration of Independence, and then all the way up to now signing of the Constitution until now. We the people, you know, these three famous words, we the people, is what is entrusted to us in a democracy. The power resides in each and one of us. It sounds very cliche, and I got to sit with it for a couple of days and think more about it. But, you know, I feel like, maybe I mentioned this earlier before, I forget, but, you know, equality and equity, it's like a tug of war. How do you know, fairly represent everyone? How do you make sure everyone's seen, heard, has enough power? That, you know, how do you make sure that my freedom isn't infringing upon Eli's freedom. You know, you have a lot of these gray areas. It's not as simple as black and white. And the Founding Fathers had a lot of difficulty, a lot of squabbling trying to figure out how to compromise. And they did so very diplomatically, not only, you know, within themselves, but we saw a lot of diplomacy with other countries. You know, America got to this record of 250 years, not just because of the country itself, but from all the help that other countries have helped us with. So it's not just this isolationist, secluded perspective. You know, we're on our own continent, you know, country of its own, with many different states. Like, it wasn't without help from other countries, and I feel like that's heavily overlooked in education.
Yeah.
But we the people, I would say, is definitely something to think about that's keeping us together, you know, fighting for a common cause. You know, at the time it was breaking away from England, fighting for that independence, but now our lives have gotten fairly comfortable and cushy, so
We're pretty affluent right now,
yeah, it's what's the new fight. I feel like a lot of times people join causes, whether they truly believe them or not. You know, they join these causes they join other people so that they become part of this collective, something beyond themselves. I think maybe that's what's keeping America still together now. It's never been just us as individuals and our freedoms, but it's something beyond ourselves, this identity of being independent, this idea of this car is probably...
Yeah, we've been, for the last minute, trying to eye the traffic. It's a little tough here. But,
yeah. You wait for this.
No, you're totally right. I should wait for these cars.
But it's been a very busy day, and it's not even the 4th of July. In the morning, nothing was really set up, and then now by the end of the day, it's 5:45. Lots have been going on. Maybe you can comment about these serendipitous encounters that weren't scripted, that we, you know, had fun indulging in. It was something that was, you know, spur of the moment. These experiences that really bring us into the present.
Oh, totally. I mean, look no further than, you know, Independence Hall, Liberty Bell. Hold on, I want to cross first. Let's cross. Okay, we've crossed the street. So, yeah, these serendipitous moments. I just feel as if a big theme of today, aside from the whole July 4th, well, July 2nd, Declaration of Independence stuff, I feel it's really important to highlight the Liberty Bell, Independence Hall. These were places that, of course, with the national spotlight, give forth national grade lines. Long lines. Independence Hall, 2 hours. Or maybe that was the Liberty Bell, I don't know. It was still a long line for both. And in the end, I think it was important to opt not to succumb to the mercy of these institutions which administer these lines and these attractions, but try to forge your own path, forge your own adventure. And to that, we really were blessed with a lot of these great conversations with historians on the street, telling stories. You'll find that here in Philly. You go to the old city, you go to the old quarter, and you'll find people who are willing to, more than willing, enthusiastically giving you stories. Yeah, let's go this way. Yeah, but you have these historians and local employees for these historic institutions who are more than willing to let you in on a fun set of stories about Philadelphia's role in the independence movement.
One of the things I have this cynical, pessimistic way of looking at things, that perhaps we now create conflicts to appease us. There's this thing called, I think the Tocqueville effect, or it's from Alexis de Tocqueville. He was like a French diplomat that visited the U.S. and I think he coined this term where or maybe someone else made the term after him, I'm not sure, but eventually we get to this point in society where we're so what do you call it? Pacified, I suppose. We're so pacified, we don't have any conflict. We're living in a very comfortable situation. You know, there's a lot of, our basic needs are met. We have survival, shelter, but we need to create conflict to give us something to solve. And perhaps maybe that's the point we're at now. It's so loud.
Yeah, we can totally resume this. Yeah, as you were saying.
What did you get out of, I forgot my name.
That's fine.
Well, I guess along the lines of like this thing called concept creep and the Tocqueville paradox, where it's like, you know, all these basic needs are being met. We need to create conflict in our otherwise comfortable lives to keep us going. Like, we need to scapegoat something, to point fingers at when something's not going wrong. We just can't be complacent, which makes sense evolutionarily. Like, you want to keep improving, going after the next thing. But this thing called concept creep, where you expand the definitions of what you're fearing, I guess. So because we have, you know, our basic needs met, we try and expand the definitions of like things beyond that. Like I don't know, it deals more with like social causes, like, you know, racism and creating microaggressions, which they definitely do exist. And I think these are really long strides. Like, we'll never reach a point of perfection. I look at it that way, where it's going to be like asymptotic. We'll never reach that point. It'll infinitely get closer and closer to that point.
Oh yeah.
So maybe America, you know, just try and bring it back with the 4th of July in America in 250 years, that I think the ideals that we're hoping for are going to be asymptotic. We'll get closer and closer. Maybe we'll take 5 steps forward, 5 steps back, whatever. But it's just the ideal to strive towards. You know, I think we'll always continually, it's like being on a treadmill.
Oh
you know?
yeah.
I feel like we're mistaking a lot of this movement for progress. That could be the case. So I think there is genuine progress, but sometimes we mistake all the movement that we're going through as pure progress, when in fact it's just busyness. I think a lot of bureaucracy is that way.
Oh, to kind of keep the idle minds at bay. To keep going with some sort of something. Yeah. Interesting. Is there anything else that struck you during today's tour of all these Philadelphia historic sites?
I feel like the police did a good job keeping everything organized. There wasn't any, it's just a lot of people at one place. And I feel like, you know, it's one of those things where, did they truly help? I'm sure they did. You know, it's nice having that order in place. And then for the 4th of July, just the amount of people that showed up. Hopefully they get something out of it. I surely got some more out of it. Like I said from the start, I felt very uneducated. You know, I learned a lot of these things we were talking about. Eli and I went through AP US history classes, and did you take AP Gov too?
No, not AP Gov.
I took AP Gov as well, and you know, I was a great student, did great on the tests, but you know, a lot of that stuff just slips your mind. My little noggin can only contain so much information that, you know, a lot of this history, it's become jumbled. So it was nice revisiting it all, taking a moment to appreciate it.
Yeah. No, but there were parades and all sorts of events, and
I think that's the nice part, having the music playing. They had, I guess that was song. I said it before, I forget the name of the American song. It'll come to me later on.
Sure. No, but there was so much music. And I think music is a way we communicate. And music's a good way to celebrate. We saw so many, well, no, we didn't see, we heard so many different genres and styles and instrumentation.
Yeah.
And it's kind of going back to that, like, everybody has their different way of approaching life. But hey, we can agree on, you know, the blessing that it is to live in America in a way.
Yeah.
What a relief it is to be in an air-conditioned spot. We're in the SEPTA station right now.
Jefferson Station.
Yeah, we're about to leave pretty soon, but not before I end the video. So, is there anything you want to communicate to the viewers who see this from their home, who may or may not want to visit Philadelphia someday? You know, what would you say to them?
I think it's a good spot for the 4th of July, you know, all the festivities being held here. I think Philadelphia has a very strong historical component to it, but as you saw earlier with the Liberty Bell line, like that's not even on the 4th of July. It's so long, so it's definitely still a tourist spot. Personally, this is just my own predisposition, but I'm not a very city person to begin with. But after today, actually, I did enjoy the city a lot. I think it was very inviting, I'd say. Is it still on? No. Yeah, the city was very inviting. I feel like, you know, I wasn't scared. I feel like in the news you hear about all these shootings, these stabbings. Philadelphia gets an awful reputation, but I guess that's with any big metropolitan city, but I don't know.
Yeah, there's
I
good
feel like-
spots, there's bad spots too.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a mixed bag with urban areas.
Yeah, but I mean, me personally, I would love to just be cuddled up on the couch watching this YouTube video instead of going out and then, at least in the sweltering heat. Today was very hot. You would definitely need to prepare, add sunscreen, drink lots of water. It's not for the faint of heart. We were able to weather the heat. That wasn't too big of an issue for us, but I could see how it could be, you know, not an enjoyable experience when the elements are working against you. But overall, it was really nice visiting these events. I feel like it's something, you know, Eli and I, we were having lots of conversations during each of the different attractions that, you know, a lot of this stuff, I feel very ignorant to it. I hate talking about things that I don't know about, and that could come across as like, you know, you're never going to be fully equipped with the knowledge to be able to communicate, discuss, or whatever, unless you're like a true, genuine expert. But it's so hard, and I was saying to Eli, he does a very good job making it accessible and inviting you to learn with him. You know, he's not claiming to know all this stuff as well. I feel the same way here. Just because I live outside of Philadelphia, I should know all about it, know all the ins and outs, but I really don't. I just, you know, I rarely go out and touch grass beyond my hometown, so I like to just, you know, it's different. Like tomorrow I was saying to Eli, I'm taking a trip to Vermont for 4th of July weekend. So I'm making strides to visit more of these places, visit more, like travel more. I was saying to Eli, when we went to school together, I did a study abroad experience in Scotland at the University of Stirling, and that really helped open my eyes to see, like, you know, the world's a lot bigger than you think, and it really humbles you and littles you in a good way. I think you should go out and venture, explore lots of these different things, even if it's uncomfortable. So this is my call to action to continue watching Eli's videos, but look at his map, visit the places that he visited. I definitely, once I get to a point where I'm more stable in my life, I could go visit your coverage project map and see, like, oh, I'm gonna go past in this state, like, what should I go and see, what should I go and visit? So I think it's nice to visit these places. They're very inviting. I feel like today was very inviting, learning about a lot of the people too, you know, telling us these stories about Lewis and Clark, and that Lewis was the cousin of Thomas Jefferson, which I learned.
That was something new for me too.
Yeah, so it's weird little things like that. And one thing I want to conclude this rambling rant with is that, you know, these sorts of experiences make life worth living. I think earlier on in the first talk I was mentioning, like, we're no better than a corpse if we're just browsing through our phone. If you're just passively engaging with Eli's videos and just watching them, that's up to you. I do the same thing. I watch a lot of his videos taking the train to work, but that's one thing. But then going out and actually going to visit these places yourself, that's what makes life worth living. Doing these experiences, stepping out of your boundaries, it makes your life more meaningful. Because I look at it as, like, you know, say you get to the last point of your last breath, and if you just scroll social media your whole life, you're not committing those things to memory, you're not really building associations, connections. And this is my psychology background getting to me, but I think what makes us really truly human, you know, what differentiates us from animals, I guess, is our ability to make these complex associations, to read a poem, you know, smell a flower and write a poem about that flower, like bring to words this experience, this ineffable experience, and that unites people together too. Making music that unites people together, conveys a feeling. I think that's what genuinely makes life worth living. I think it makes it more enriched, more fulfilling, you know, being able to make these complex associations. I think, you know, I feel like we have all the facts in front of us, and then just rearranging them, you know, hearing it, tasting it, smelling it, these things that interacting with your world, that's what we're meant to be doing. Like, we're here to interact with the world. And I think today was a really good day. I can't wait to like go to Vermont and relax and dwell on this and think about it, contemplate, you know, the whole experience, and try and think like, you know, what did I learn from it? Kind of sit down, process it all. Because again, life is so sped up. So we're having all these experiences, but do we ever really get a chance to like sit down in peace and quiet and think about these things? I feel like we're just so, again, caught up in doing, that we never just sit and be. I really liked, on a tangent, Ben Franklin. We visited Ben Franklin's house,
Yeah.
I think. And,
Or the museum.
or the Ben Franklin Museum.
Yeah.
And he was just an ingenious, and I said to Eli, he's a tinkerer. I feel like a lot of the times back then, they weren't self-proclaimed experts in anything. They saw a problem and they fixed it. You know, there was a soup bowl he made for eating soup on a boat, so the boat's
Right.
constantly rocking. And his idea was, instead of just a soup bowl, he made like a circular plate of a bunch of little bowls. So if one bowl tipped over, it would just spill into another one. But then Eli facetiously said, like, you know, what if it goes beyond that next bowl? And then I just said, oh, I'll make the bowl bigger so it goes into another bowl and another bowl. But it's like little things like that, tinkering around. We don't really get the time of day. I feel like we're so busy again to just sit and tinker and devise new contraptions and just be creative. I think, you know, we're all born creative. All children are creative, imaginative, but it's beaten out of us as we grow up. So
No, that's fantastic, and don't worry about any rambling. I love it. This is what
Okay.
the coverage project's about. I promise
Good.
you.
This is all
I do enough rambling.
unscripted,
Yeah.
all extemporaneously,
Exactly.
off the cuff.
Right.
I think that's the best way to enjoy. Like, we went to a Quaker house.
Oh, hold on.
This is my thing.
Okay. Well,
yeah, we'll see.
that might be a train.
Yeah.
Anyway, Shady, happy
Yes.
4th of July.
Thank you, Eli.
Yeah, I'm off to DC, still in this sweltering heat, but I'll see you later.
And I hope you all had a good time enjoying the video. Thanks for tuning in. I think this is my train.
With the train coming by, more travels to come. I will see you at the next location.
I can't think of a better place to celebrate the 250th anniversary of American independence than in the national capital. I'm not going to spend the day covering this city at large, though. We already did that back in 2022. 2 days worth of Washington, D.C. exploration is available for viewing on my channel. Again, link in the description. It's 8 in the morning and already hot. It's been hot every single day of this tour. There's some historic heat wave going on. I guess it's fitting, a historic heat for a historic commemoration. I can already sense that the afternoon's going to be brutal. There was an Independence Day parade for 10:30, cancelled due to hot weather. Like in Philly, I'm not alone. I'm joined by another friend of mine who's here to celebrate Independence Day with me. You'll get to hear from her later on. She's quite fond of the city and knowledgeable about it as well. The DC Metro was shockingly efficient. It's been 4 years since I was last in the capital, and it's all coming back now. On top of that, the city is quite beautiful. I anticipated enjoying this familiar place, but with a new character, a different tone. I'm told early on that nearly the entirety of the district was constructed post-1812. Following the burning of the city by British forces in the War of 1812, the American government got a second go at constructing buildings and monuments. With this do-over came a desire for grander scale, and that's what we see today all throughout this federal district. My friend had told me in advance last evening that the security detail was monitoring what was going in and out of the National Mall, and that backpacks were prohibited. Well, shoot, the bag I had was too large. From this info, I decided to pack fairly light. Just the GoPro camera I had been employing, and a fun National Parks passport collection book, wrapped in a protective airport blanket. Highly recommend for US travelers. Maybe someday I'll make a video on it. But that would be it for the entire day. As we circle the tidal basin and near the Jefferson Memorial, we're noticing the iconic landmark is fenced off, and the closest point at which we can see the dome is from a distance. Okay, maybe we can get close to another monument. The FDR Memorial isn't too far away. We try to find the next bridge, and nope, An armored vehicle blocks the way, along with a police officer. No way we're getting past that. Naturally, they're as vigilant as can be. At this point, the only detour, a bridge crossing that leads us to Virginia, out of the DC territory. Under the sun's potent beams, we're left to dodge bicycles and anticipate the noise of motors zooming past us. But it's an opportunity to visit some lesser-known monuments along the way. During the through walk, we're noticing the impeccable design plan in effect. We've got L'Enfant to thank for this. From one monument, you witness a great vista of another. Already from the Thomas Jefferson Memorial, the Washington monuments in clear sight. That same Washingtonian obelisk is visible from a walking path from across the Potomac River. You could be at one monument and see others around a 360-degree view. And so many other features of the city are invited into the mix. The White House, the Federal Capitol, the Lincoln Memorial. It creates an incredible tourist viewing experience. That is, if it were open to us. People are camping out all day. I've got to give them credit, though, for diligence. Fireworks are set for late tonight. Like 11 p.m. late. You've got to be out pretty early in the morning to find the best spots to set up camp. And then someone needs to hold the fort down for the whole day. George Washington died in 1799, just a year before the national capital was formally moved to this mosquito-infested swampland. But he was certainly involved in its creation. Now at the 250-year mark, it's an international city that brings people both from all over this country and all over the world. Would George Washington be appalled at the enormous bureaucracy and overreach that was to become linked culturally to the national capital? I mean, this federal district was supposed to be a necessary setting to house the affairs of the national government. Nothing more. Would he be impressed by the technological progress that we've made? We're not exactly dying off from malaria, nor are we getting around by horse and carriage. We come to find personnel of many ranks and affiliations. DC Police, National Guard, Secret Service scattered about, all with more of their armored vehicles. What's going on? We piece together that the National Mall altogether is cordoned off, and the military's here. They're keeping strict watch for any funny business. On guard for a potential dangerous act, I suppose. It's the 250. People from across the country are funneling into a small, congested area, and you never know what lunatics might pass through with some sinister ideas. At long last, we connect with the Arlington National Cemetery. More than a hill complex, a solemn reminder of the sacrifices for our sustained freedoms. That our country maintains its prolonged existence at a very real cost. With each grave, a life cut short, but given a dignified burial, to be remembered and honored. Arlington is not only the resting place for those who have died in combat. Additionally, veterans, military family members, and other notable figures including President John F. Kennedy are buried here. As we approach the tomb of the unknown soldier, we find military guards performing the changing of the guard ceremony, which takes place every 30 minutes. These sentinels, selected for duty upon meeting rigorous qualifications, perform this respected ceremony with the tightest of discipline, not wavering for even the most brutal weather conditions. I guess we can define our American independence by many things. The sacrifices made to save countless more, the small miracles which allowed us victory at critical moments, the valor that provided the American value system the longevity and momentum to persist through the ages. My big question this morning has been the following. How might the American principles highlighted back in Philadelphia be remembered? Simply put, how might one celebrate the 4th of July? And then it becomes obvious. Honoring those who gave us these privileges becomes only the first of several means by which we could, in theory, celebrate. And by this point, the temperature is easily over 100 degrees. The extreme heat makes our continued walk a scorching one. As we move beyond the cemetery, there's a parking nightmare. Tow trucks are on alert everywhere. It makes me real glad I chose to take the metro out of nearby Alexandria. After a much-deserved rest inside an air-conditioned McDonald's, we resume our journey and take the metro down to Smithsonian Station near where we had started the day. We aim to enter the National Mall for what was the Great American State Fair, a massive expo that supposedly featured an exhibition for each state of the US. However, the station's atmosphere could not be more different. Emerging from the station into the daylight, we were met by a crowd unlike anything we've seen. Understandably appropriate for the 250, but not for a rough itinerary. The line for one of only 2 security checkpoints stretched for an entire block, and then wrapped around to the street perpendicular to it. We weren't the only ones drawn into this highlight. Like in Philadelphia, we both reasoned we should be making the best use of our time. Why get sunburnt stuck queuing behind a line of angry people when you could get sunburnt while enjoying the day anywhere else in the city? It was settled. Let's ditch this area and re-enter the metro. We'll find some other places in downtown DC. We first tried to take interest in Ford's Theater. This was the site of the infamous Abraham Lincoln assassination that gripped the nation over 160 years ago. Sadly, the theater itself was closed for maintenance until August, but we were permitted to explore the Peterson House, the dwelling into which the unconscious Lincoln was carried, and stayed bedridden until his death the next morning. It was quite the informative museum with various exhibits and readings to immerse you into this event. Here was another way to celebrate the 4th. We can remember the events that shape our modern America. The day continued with a visit to the National Portrait Gallery and Smithsonian American Art Museum, both sharing the same building but occupying different wings thereof. I'll admit, art museums aren't usually my first choice when I'm visiting any destination. I can appreciate the role art plays in our culture, but unless we've got some extraordinary relevance to the theme of a given travel day, these museums aren't really going to be for me. It was my friend who wanted to give this place a visit, and I figured why not? Something new, something I haven't seen. Air conditioning ain't too bad around this time of day either. Though I soon grew to really enjoy the time there, for I was beginning to put together a certain awareness. This was another way to celebrate Independence Day. The art we were seeing was a manifestation of American ideals, especially the vernacular artistry which evokes something more relatable than the highbrow modern art you'd often find frequently in galleries. Yes, we can choose to celebrate the creativity fostered by the cultural conditions of the American spirit. And then we shifted to the portrait gallery, and that just delighted me. I had grown up with a penchant for learning about the US presidents. I memorized all sorts of random facts about the presidents. For some reason, it was one of the first interests I had as a young toddler, so these portraits were all too familiar. It would be an affront to today's reality to ignore the obvious. In this party, not all Americans want to dance. Some are ashamed to display a celebratory mood. Others don't care what a privilege it is to be a citizen of this country. Some don't believe that the American values still hold up in the modern day. I may disagree with many of these people, but that's the beauty of a country which promotes free expression of ideas. It's what the founders wanted. In my personal opinion, it would be ungrateful for us to stand on the shoulders of the individuals we're viewing in this portrait gallery with our smartphones and full bellies and claim that we can't celebrate either their achievements or their role in America's development because of circumstances outside our control. You've got to wonder though, how many people in this country are letting their political opinions stifle their quality of life? That extends to festive occasions. Could people be enjoying holidays like July 4th if not for a voracious addiction to the news cycle? To that I ask, what gain or benefit are you receiving? Are you happier as a result of your stance? Are you more appreciative? Do you find life more beautiful from a refusal to celebrate? That's what I believe should matter before any political tribalism or moral debate. It's your choice to enjoy or dislike your precious time on Earth. We finally decide on exiting the buzz of the big city and retreat to a quieter area for a casual dinner. On our way, we can't help but find humor on our journey. We're crossing through this expanse of natural scenery, folded in between great urban development. Weird to think we're still smack dab in the middle of the US capital city. This portion of Rock Creek Park housed a hidden wonderland of forest cover and primitive trails acting as a natural buffer for, you guessed it, Rock Creek. Did you know DC was full of these types of parks? The fanfare is optional. You can totally celebrate the 4th simply by enjoying the day, being appreciative for your tranquil environment. At the end of the day, the spirit of visiting smaller, less grandiose attractions carried over to DC, and if not for that, I don't think I would have discovered all these ways to celebrate July 4th. So for that, I'm thankful. Before heading back home, I wanted to gather some intel. Maybe the line for the National Mall was smaller by this time of day. I was wrong. I hopped off at a connecting metro station just to gauge the prospective volume of passengers to the Smithsonian station. Turns out, this was just the start of the night for these impassioned celebrants. Significantly larger crowds had assembled. The metro station was filled with tourists draped in American flags, shiny red, white, and blue clothing. You could tell everyone was headed for the National Mall. One side of tracks, a sea of chaos. The other side, by comparison, well, hardly anybody was headed home at this hour. Ultimately, this would be the end of any serious exploration in the city.
Alright, well, it's been a long, hot, dare I say the word sweltering, hot day. It's the 4th of July. 4th of July 2026, 250 years to the day that a bunch of people decided that we were going to come up with our own idea. And through that came a new country. And with that came lots of innovations, lots of development, lots of growth. And today was a day of celebration. A couple days ago, you saw, Shady and I visited Philadelphia to understand what does it mean to be independent. And now today we're discovering what does it mean to celebrate that. 250 years to the day. So I didn't explore DC alone. I was accompanied by a friend of mine, another friend of mine. So, introduce yourself in any way you'd like.
Hello, I'm Nadej. I've been Eli's friend for about 2 years now. I study classics as well as peace war and defense. I consider DC a home of sorts. I'm in town on an internship program, but I lived here with my family about 10 years ago. And rediscovering the city has been really interesting. Exploring with Eli these past 2 days has been really cool. And we've had a pretty unique and incredible 4th of July.
Yeah, unique is definitely an understatement. I think you might go any other 4th of July, there might be some celebrations, but you could tell that the spirit and the character of this celebratory day was unlike anything I've personally seen. And I've seen a lot of these things as we've seen on the coverage project throughout the country. So tell me, Nadej,
how are you feeling after this day of exploration?
I'm feeling pretty great. I would argue that what we did is perhaps one of the most American things you can do, and one of the best ways to celebrate. We stayed off the beaten path. We didn't follow what the crowds were doing. We didn't follow a strict schedule or guideline or wait for people to tell us where to go and what to do and how to enjoy the day. We didn't let the fear of missing out get to us in the same way that the founders didn't let the fear of not being able to trade with the British or losing luxury goods that they could import get to them. Yeah, so we didn't really check out the mall. We walked an inordinate amount. We went to sites that are lesser known, including two really interesting national park trails that we did about 3-4 miles on each.
We walked a lot.
We walked
a lot today.
33,000 steps, which is about 16 miles.
Crazy.
So,
yeah.
yeah, I'm ecstatic. I'm very happy. I'm feeling great after this 4th of July.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really agree. I think we made it clear that we wanted to celebrate the 250, not suffer through it. I mean, we saw those long lines that stretched for a whole block and then wrapped around the corner, and I think we made a quick decision that we didn't want to spend this set of hours, these limited minutes, doing things in conditions that wouldn't satisfy us. I think that was really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we're here exactly 250 years to the day after this country was born. Our formal birth 250 years ago exactly. What do you make of that? Just being here, having this day of exploration and adventure on such a commemorative occasion. What does it mean to you?
That's a charged question. It means a lot to me.
But answer.
Of course, yeah. I
honestly.
adore this country. I mean, I really often struggle to put it into words. I think the American lifestyle is one I love. I love American. I consider myself more American than I do anything else, despite having spent a lot of time in other places. I like the American impulse, the American creativity, the spark that you can sort of feel running through the entire nation. And as someone who loves the classics, I love to see every day embodied in daily experiences, those ideas being lived out. The fact that we can trust people, for the most part, to self-govern, that we can have a popular government, that we can be afforded certain liberties that allow us to do things like this and explore and discover things and create good lives, not because we're compelled to, but because we willingly want to and are free to do so. And so it's difficult because I think national energies and the character of our citizens have ebbed and flowed over the past 250 years, and we're arguably in a rough patch on the 250th. So there's mixed feelings, but overall I'm very optimistic, and I've felt extremely happy and reinvigorated today.
Yeah, I mean, if today was any testament to, yeah, there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot of calamity, there's a lot of misfortune, there's a lot of tension, but for the most part, people out here in DC were enjoying their day. There's plenty of characters out there. There's plenty of people just living to the fullest on this day. So I think it's a good marker for, you have the choice to celebrate. There's no compulsion. I think that's the beauty of it. You can choose to make the most of life. You can make the most of your daily grind. You can make the most of, in spite of a lot of the things that you might hear. I think that's really important. We did a lot, clearly. We walked a lot. We saw a lot. We did a lot. Was there any highlight of the day for you? Was there any part of the day or any attraction or any set of sights that felt most rewarding to you?
Definitely the grave of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. I am fascinated with Jack Kennedy because he represents to me the sort of tension that has always embodied the American character. This sort of optimism and recklessness, his affair with Marilyn Monroe, his sort of scandalous social life, and yet his ability to want to hold himself to extremely high ideals despite of his flaws, being an extremely eloquent speaker, staying with his wife through everything. And that's also sort of embodied in his foreign policy. He didn't want to do as many covert operations, and yet he wanted to keep the safety of the nation completely intact. And so on seeing excerpts from his speeches carved in the marble, and the fact that he is buried next to his wife and his family, despite the tragic end he met, again, I was reminded of that tension and the fact that I think the better part of it can prevail. Yes, the bad and the good can fight, and people can fail and not be able to hold themselves to the ideals they want to, but there's always reason to be optimistic, and even if that tension is perennial, there's always a need, if not an obligation, for optimism.
Yeah, beautifully put. So we're here in this Rock Creek Park. It's actually beautiful. I hope I showed on camera the nice stroll to get some pizza through this park. It's not every day you go through a state park and just for dinner, you know. But we have this park, this beautiful area, and outside this park we have a beautiful city, beautifully planned, immaculate set of buildings and monuments and memorials. And 250 years ago, this was nothing but a wetland, a swamp. Maybe some tribes lived here, maybe a couple surveyors popped by every so often. But it was nothing like this. What do you think the Founding Fathers would feel, or how do you think they would react seeing this great city maybe 250 years after the birth of this nation?
That's a good question. I think a lot of the city became great only a generation or two after the Founding Fathers, and I like to think that their children saw it. John Quincy Adams liked to go to public worship in the Capitol building, and the Capitol was lovely when he served, and actually died there, died in the rotunda of the Capitol building, fighting slavery. And so I think this city embodies so much beauty, and it embodies always fighting towards an ideal. And the fact that, like you said, this used to be a wetland filled with mosquitoes, and now it's extremely beautiful is a testament to human ingenuity and human effort. And while some of the founders may have had ideas about what America would look like one way or another, I think they'd be impressed to see how far the Union has made it, and pleased that we've preserved it and enhanced it in such a way.
Yeah, I definitely agree with those arguments of yours, yeah. You've clearly communicated to me today and yesterday that you're really a big fan of this city. What would you tell the people who watch this video? What is your argument for DC in a way? Because I think DC has such a mixed reputation. Some people love it, some people hate it. You clearly enjoy being here. What would you say about DC to people who are not as familiar or who want to know more about DC?
Two things. I guess one more ideological, one more practical. I have expressed to Eli that I love this city so much because to me it conveys the flourishing of the classical ideals that our nation was based on, with these incredible marble buildings, this impeccable design, to have certain monuments gazing at one another in a very thoughtful way. It's the embodiment of something really beautiful, and you ought to come here just to think about that and experience that, even if you don't live here forever. And on a more practical note, I think any place is what you make of it. And every city is so big that even in a lifetime, you might never uncover every corner. And in the short time I've been here for the summer, I consider myself very lucky to have found a place like this park in my first few days, which is often deserted, which doesn't have a ton of foot traffic, which a lot of locals don't come to. And so, in every place you go, I guess particularly in DC, look for what calls to you, look for what draws you in. Don't focus too much on an itinerary, because I discovered this place completely by chance, and you never know what you could find.
Yeah, fantastic. Nadesh, happy 250, happy 4th. Well, here in DC, sitting under this gazebo with one of many jet planes soaring above us, creating a thunderous roar. It's not the end of that. That's going to happen for a few more hours, maybe. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. More travels to come. I will see you at the next location for our final stop of this America 250 tour.
Yay!
All right. Thank you so much. At the beginning of our trip, we paid our respects to the story of Plymouth. We've learned this story in schools as well, most often as Thanksgiving season rolls around. While the Plymouth story is no doubt an important one, another tale was already unfurling down along a different part of the North American Atlantic coast. One that predated the Plymouth colony. 13 years before the Mayflower landed in Massachusetts, the English established a settlement in Virginia. What would become the first success story for the English in the New World. First thing in the morning, I'm met with a commemorative display of flags at Jamestown Settlement, Site and Museum. The plaque in front of these flags reads that there have been commemorations for other milestones in American history, like the Jamestown's Quadricentennial, 1607 to 2007, one flag flying for each of the 50 states, given equal honors, a tribute to what's to come. It might even demonstrate a nationwide longing for historic remembrance of this event. I can already tell the heat wave of the past week has been climbing down. Well, maybe it's just the clouds above me, but today feels more palatable than days prior. Was the heat a metaphor for the 250's fanfare and energy? For me, this was an apt cooldown from the lively celebration of DC after all. Just like Plymouth, this area wasn't empty. The Paspahegh, a group of Powhatan people, called this area Tsenacommacah. In this homeland, the men would hunt and fish, while the women would farm the land. I'm finding striking similarities with what we found at the Patuxet village back in Plymouth. The same structures, the same hollowed-out log canoes, and from what the guides tell me, similar involvement in a greater trade network. Around 1580, Chief Powhatan acquires power over the Virginia Peninsula, forging a great alliance between the many tribes that inhabited the region. Their population numbered around 14,000. However, the arrival of the English set in motion dramatic changes for the area that would forever alter the course of Virginia history. The English settled in Virginia for different reasons than those in Plymouth. While the Plymouth colony served the desires of the Puritans' religious visions, the Jamestown colony was founded as more of a business venture. In a way, the varied purposes of these two settlements kind of reflect the varied interests and ambitions we see today. Some seek moral sanctification and purity, while others, worldly success and wealth. The Virginia Company of London was founded in 1606 for the purpose of settlement in the New World. In the wake of Columbus's discovery of the New World for Europeans, there had been over a century of exploration and settlement dominated by Spain and Portugal. England had heard about the overseas opportunity and wealth that arose from New World investment and wanted in on the spoils. They sought precious metals like gold and a passage to the Pacific. The English were in direct competition with the French and Dutch companies who also were in the game of exploration. In a depressed economy, the time to act was now. They might as well try. The crew and passengers of the Susan Constant, Godspeed, and Discovery, the English answer to the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria, departed London on December 20th, 1606. By February of the next year, they passed the Canary Islands. By spring, the Caribbean was reached. Roughly a month later, on April 26, 1607, the expedition made it to today's Virginia. It wasn't until after another couple weeks of searching that they chose to land, May 13th, at an easily defendable site a bit upstream along one of this area's many inland waterways. This patch of land would be named Jamestown, in honor of the current King of England, James I. The body of water we're viewing was also named for the monarch, the James River. Remember Richmond? Yeah, those waters drained down here eventually. This 4-month-long journey was sponsored by investors, but that didn't halt the difficulty that accompanied the voyage itself. Cramped and confining conditions were the norm on these vessels. Talk about going stir-crazy. But after landfall, the journey held some promise. The settlement's riverfront location allowed for easy ocean access, a major boon for economic activity and trade of commodities back to England. Not only would items be shipped to and from England and her new colony, ideas just as much were transported across the pond. In due time, settlers soon discovered that this coastal region held fertile soil and abundant wildlife as well. The colonists built a fort to protect themselves from raids. Triangular in shape, it contained storehouses, a church, guardhouses, the whole kit and caboodle. In Jamestown Fort, you notice the appearance of the structures, a clear borrowing of the vernacular architecture you might have seen in 17th century England. A fire burned down the first fort, but it was rebuilt in 1610. By 1614, people began to live outside these walls, leaving the most important buildings to remain inside. Not only were the English vulnerable to native attacks, technically this land was under the deed of the Spanish. Claiming this land for England would incur Spain's hostility. Instead, they played off their activity as purely mercantile. They were just doing business, making money, that's all. It was a great excuse for plausible deniability, but the English knew exactly what they were doing. Jamestown was just as much a strategic foothold in the New World as it was an opportunity to make money and gain material resources. But this colony was far from easy to maintain. Life in Jamestown was quite brutal. Sporadic shipments of often spoiled products created struggles for a steady food supply. Contaminated water fueled an epidemic of dysentery and typhoid. All of this, in no surprise, led to rampant disease and death in those early years. Less than a year after first settlement, only 38 of the original 104 settlers were still alive. Conditions had to improve lest they end up like the last few attempts. Not too far away along the outer banks of present-day North Carolina sat the ghost of ill-fated Roanoke from the 1580s. The English were also contending with a climate quite foreign to them. The temperatures of the British Isles had been significantly cooler and more predictable than the subtropical Virginia climate, which saw drastic fluctuations. Merciless frosts in winter and hot and muggy summers. On top of that, severe droughts plagued the area in its first years. To think, they expected a tepid, inviting Mediterranean climate. And how could you be entirely self-sufficient so far away from home? Most goods were imported to Virginia directly from England. In these desperate times, the colonists had no choice but to form ties with the Powhatan. Commercial and social relations developed as the settlers traded with their neighbors for food, boats, any sort of valuable information. But these relationships became strained over time as conditions on the Virginia Peninsula worsened over those first few years. In addition, times called for new leadership. The famed Captain John Smith was appointed the new leader in September of 1608. He was a skilled explorer, mapmaker, and diplomat, and he saved the colony from starvation. However, what saved the Jamestown colony was exactly what earned him strong dislike among all the other colonists. Yeah, if you're told, "He that will not work shall not eat," you may not like that. By October 1609, he was gone, just like that. In 1619, the population has reached 928. In the same year, we find what you could consider the beginning of democratic governance in North America, with the meeting of the General Assembly. This convention enacted the encouragement of English traditions in Virginia to keep the local population happy. The Great Charter is formed, allowing settlers to own land, to work for themselves. Now, if you're not a member of Old World England's elites whose family has inherited property by right of tradition since time immemorial, this concept is almost unheard of, let alone rare to find. It's one of the first examples of the potential of upward mobility in America. Now a classic right with which we Americans acquaint ourselves. And while there were great opportunities for many at Jamestown, it's really a mixed bag. If there's anything to be learned from Jamestown, it's what true history is. A smattering of individual interests stacked atop various values of a community, overlaid once more against the backdrop of wider national, cultural, and global trends. Jamestown was a business colony with people at all rungs of the socio-economic ladder. One fact or event often shouldn't be the defining cut-and-dry thesis statement of an area or time period. Some people became wealthy gentry who didn't need to work. Some became tradesmen who lived day by day. Many English subjects were imported to Jamestown and suffered as indentured servants. In fact, 80% of Virginia's colonists arrived as indentured servants, and 60% didn't survive to complete their contracts. That statistic is astounding. The first Africans were also brought to Virginia as indentured servants, originally captured in Angola and sent aboard a Portuguese vessel with the help of African slave raiders themselves. Life wasn't too great for them either, and many more slaves were due to arrive over the next 2+ centuries. Frequent clashes with the Powhatan come and go, plantation houses soon develop, and before you know it, an English population is spread up the banks of the James River. The original colony dwellers become landowners with the Virginia Company, and what do these plantations produce? Well, tobacco, of course. Back in 1612, John Rolfe decides to experiment with what would become Virginia's signature cash crop and turns the colony into a plantation society. Tobacco eventually became Jamestown's prime cash crop. In those early years, the colonists grew so much tobacco for profit that they neglected more essential crops for their own survival. A planter aristocracy develops, and over the next several decades builds up a number of families which ultimately produced George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe, 4 of the first 5 US presidents, along with an assortment of other influential American figures. Thanks to Jamestown, Virginia rises to instrumental prominence in colonial affairs throughout the rest of the century. The Virginia Company becomes the Royal Virginia Colony in 1624. 1632 sees substantial peace brokered between the English and Powhatan after 10 years of war. 2 years later, in 1634, Virginia is divided up into 8 shires, or counties, as we'd call them today. By 1697, Virginia's population exceeds 70,000. Now, the fun of a living history museum is all fine and good, but the location is totally wrong. In 1994, the true site of Jamestown was rediscovered. Luckily, we can head there right now. Welcome to historic Jamestown, one unit of the National Park Service's larger Colonial National Historical Park. The Jamestown story is recorded not only in historical accounts, but in archaeology as well. It's here that you... Wait, what's this? A fee zone? I didn't expect to pay for admission here. This isn't exactly Yellowstone or Zion. Oh well. You'll actually have to pay 2 admission fees if you want to see everything. One for the national park, another for Jamestown Rediscovery. This is part of Virginia's own state-run historic initiative, Preservation Virginia. This partnership isn't unique, it's somewhat like what happened when we were at Redwood National and State Parks. What you'll find here is still worth the price in my opinion. I walked through the gate right here and instantly felt this rush of solemnity hit me. I'm feeling the gravity of 400 years of history. It's speaking to me through the exhibits, whether authentic or reproductions after the fact. It's this spiritual component that remains, even when a building is lost to time. I'm standing at the humble site that laid the first foundations for this country, the country which has blessed me with my life. How could I not feel moved? I yearn to understand what these settlers were thinking, the thoughts, emotions associated with their toils and strife. Included at this site, one of the first burial grounds, a church, reconstructed buildings, statues of John Smith and Pocahontas, who actually played such a pivotal role in ensuring the survival of the colonists through mediation and diplomacy, as well as delivering food and information. It's a complex story worth a whole video in itself. What's more, you're also bumping into archaeologists at work, literally unearthing more to the Jamestown story. It's an ongoing research effort that never seems to end. I find architecture to tell a fascinating story where we find a church. You've got this one location, but multiple iterations of construction that span the location's history. From a simple sailcloth to wooden church structures to brick, the traces of written records in architecture paint a story of construction, then deconstruction, then reconstruction, then replacement, then abandonment, so on. The current memorial church from 1906 exists as a symbolic culmination of its spiritual predecessors, representing the conflict between preservation and time. It's clear that historic Jamestown has become a museum of the site's preservation efforts as well as the area's history. How can we best preserve American history as much as we might want to celebrate it? Eventually, the settlement had to expand beyond its wooden posts. The new town was built up beginning in the 1620s, facing a great road. Throughout the 1600s, you might have also found industries such as textile and silk manufacture, glassmaking, and brewing, among others. And look around us. Forests. The New World became an endless reserve of shipbuilding materials, such as timber for the frame, as well as natural resources for pitch, cordage, masts, etc. Britain owes at least some of its historic rise towards naval supremacy to the vast resources on the North American continent. I want to add that the material culture displayed at the Jamestown site reflects an international trade occurring that included not only Virginia and England, but regions throughout the world. Similarly to the emotion I had by that metal gate, I can't help but imagine all the stories, unrecorded, lost to time. Did they have any faint clue how legendary, how mythologized their little ramshackle outpost would grow to be? Your imagination wanders to the question of what information the spirits of these people, all these years later, might try to communicate with us if they could. What did the residents of these once small houses, now knocked down and eroded by centuries of natural decay, do for a living? What interpersonal events and drama played out on these banks of the James River? What dreams or ambitions did those my age have? We will never know quite all of it. The great magnitude of lost wisdom, lost advice, lost warnings of regret fills me with dread and simultaneously motivates me to live my life with purpose. Given that this is the oldest English settlement in the US, it's not a surprise that we're only scratching the surface despite this exhaustive summary. We haven't even begun to discuss Bacon's rebellion or the trials of the Virginia state preservation efforts, and we've got one more site to learn about. Come, let's go for a drive on the Colonial Parkway, connecting this critical monument to the other within Colonial National Historical Park. On the other bank of the Virginia Peninsula sits the aforementioned Yorktown. At this site, the final major battle of the Revolutionary War takes place. I felt it would be a fun touch to continue the narrative symmetry with our first day of travel in eastern Massachusetts. While we learned of Lexington and Concord the first day, we ought to dive into Yorktown today. While Yorktown thrived as a key port town, its market depended on trade with Britain, and therefore strained when exploited from the taxation without representation imposed on the colonies. 169 years after the English had established Jamestown, Virginia turned its back on Britain and thrust itself into the American struggle for independence, along with the other colonies. 5 years later, in 1781, the Revolutionary War was still raging on with no foreseeable end to come. This conflict was ripping apart the social fabric of America. Yet local patriots take part in the war effort in all forms, from direct combat to off-the-field aid and support. Since the British took New York City early on, there's been heavy fighting in the northern colonies. Over the last few years, George Washington has taken command of the Continental Army and has won the trust and support of French officer Rochambeau. He ultimately helps the Americans make pivotal gains and turn the tide in the South, despite the British hold on Savannah in Georgia. The war seemed to be at a stalemate, and Washington's army was an unstable powder keg of disenchantment, especially after a defeat at Charleston. On the British side, Lieutenant General Cornwallis invades Virginia without permission from his superior General Clinton, and now has to set up a naval base somewhere. He decides on none other than Yorktown, but the French General Marquis de Lafayette caught wind of his location and rallies troops to entrap him on the Virginia Peninsula. Washington and Rochambeau secretly come down to Virginia, while de Grasse, another French high-ranking officer, cuts the British off from naval support at the Chesapeake. Still, there are only 5,000 Continentals versus 8,000 of Cornwallis's men, but all that has to be done to complete a siege line was to take control of two redoubts, 9 and 10. In the dead of night, the Allies silently and under dangerous conditions construct a series of trenches for further advantage, surprising the British by morning. Cornwallis realizes that he and his men are totally trapped. As fighting lingers on, the Allies inch closer and in time complete the siege line. And as we walk and observe the earthen trenches dug, we see the scale of the labor that went into carving out these siege lines. Throughout this time, local residents are very much affected with bombardment, noise, and activity. It's an incredible juxtaposition. These peaceful meadows, a stage for fierce fighting and terrible bloodshed. Without other options, pinned in one spot and losing critical supplies, Cornwallis realizes that the situation is untenable for victory at Yorktown. On October 19th, 1781, a drumbeat joins a white flag and appearing above the trench line. The fire stops. Cornwallis isn't there when the surrender takes place. He's feeling unwell and has his officers handle the surrender process. Those cannons we see, surrendered as part of the greater arsenal of weapons handed over. They became trophies of war. Can you picture ahead? The sobbing British troops? The disgruntled American and French upon hearing "ground your firelocks"? Based on historical accounts, it was rare to see a happy face on this battlefield. That's war. The Redcoats marched off the battlefield after surrender to the beat of a drum. This poignant parade of thousands attracted a crowd for miles around the area, these thousands marching with flags and weapons surrendered. In this one battle, a third of British troops stationed in North America were taken off the playing field. Although only about 5 to 10% of Cornwallis's men were actually wounded or killed, the surrender of thousands more soldiers forced the British to reevaluate the worth in fighting any longer. On September 3rd, 1783, Great Britain formally recognizes US sovereignty in the Treaty of Paris. But that wasn't for another 2 years. Although the site wasn't formally memorialized for another century, Yorktown Battlefield stands today and forever as a memorial to the dream of freedom, realized through determination and sacrifice. It could be said that on this peninsula, both America's cultural foundations and freedoms were laid down and built up. It's truly remarkable to witness 4+ centuries of history in one day on this one little strip of land. Americans, I want to ask you, are you or do you know anyone who's a quarter this and a quarter that, 1/8 this, so on? It's quite a frequent case with anyone who's had family in America for more than a couple generations. The opportunities provided by the political, cultural, and geographic conditions were exactly what enticed communities from countless disparate cultural and ethnic backgrounds, my ancestors included, to risk it all and pour into this landmass. Today, this translates to a contemporary population of millions who owe their life to the sacrifices earlier Americans had made for us to reap the fruits of life's adventures. America, like any country, has its flaws, but no country can be perfect. There is no utopia, even if many have tried. The best we can do is find a best-case scenario ordeal out of the societies we inhabit and participate in, and there's still plenty for which to be both proud and appreciative. Just because the 250th anniversary has passed doesn't mean we have to return to our normal routine. It took over 8 years to secure our freedoms as a new country. Why stop celebrating now? In order to create the future, you must know what your past was. And thus I urge you all, ignore what the haters say. If you enjoy what the United States has brought to your life, maybe like me, it's brought you the breath of life, period, find your own way to celebrate and honor the American cause. From someone who's seen them all, may these 50 states see another 250 years, and I hope many more. More travels to come. I will see you at the next location.